Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. On Monday, there was an increased police presence in Pelican Lake First Nation in Saskatchewan. RCMP are now saying that was due to the death of a 24-year-old man. On November 25th, around 6 p.m., Spiritwood RCMP received a report about an assault on the Pelican Lake First Nation. When officers arrived, they found a victim with serious injuries. 24-year-old Raik Bill was pronounced dead by first responders at the scene. 20-year-old Zelda Bill was arrested at the scene and charged with manslaughter. The offender and victim were known to each other. Zelda Bill made her first court appearance on November 27th. Her next court date is set for December 4th in North Battleford Provincial Court. Saskatchewan RCMP Major Crimes is still investigating. It's been 5 years since the Yukon government promised to protect the majority of the Peel Watershed in northern Yukon. But now the government is suing Yukon's Environmental Board over its decision to recommend against a proposed mineral exploration project within the watershed. As Sarah Connors tells us, many in the Yukon and Northwest Territories feel the government has gone back on its word, and they're once again coming together to protect the Peel.
It's a court case many gathered here didn't think they'd see again. Dozens rallied outside Whitehorse's main courthouse on Wednesday in protest of a judicial review launched by the Yukon government. Protesters here feel the court case jeopardizes the integrity of the Peel Watershed Regional Land Use Plan.
Time and time again, the government has disappointed First Nation people, fallen back on broken promises.
The Peel Watershed Planning Region is a 68,000 square kilometer area located in northern Yukon. It's highly valued by nearby First Nations in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories for its clean water and untouched lands. After a 14 years long court battle to protect the Peel, First Nations and the Yukon government signed the Peel Land Use Plan in 2019. It ensures 83% of the watershed is protected from development.
A few years ago, we were happy. We were hearing some pretty good things, and coming from the government and here and there.
In 2021, Vancouver-based mining exploration company Silver 47 sought approval to do exploration work in the Peel's Michelle Creek area. The project is the first to go through the Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board, or YESAB, since the plan was signed. YESAB recommended the project not go through due to significant effects it would have on wildlife and First Nations people, among other things. But the government disagrees. Its lawsuit asked for YESAB's decision to be quashed and for the project to be reassessed.
It is time for the territory to be respecting regional plans, respecting land planning. And
Jyoti Overdoon is the outreach manager for Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society Yukon chapter. She says the lawsuit is a slap in the face after years of fighting to protect the Peel.
The fact that now they're being taken to court over this really doesn't bode well for the future of that land plan and for how development or projects are going to be put through.
The hearing sparked protest in communities across the Yukon and the Northwest Territories on Wednesday.
There is not going to be a future if we don't stand up as First Nation people and the owners of the land and all of the people who are allies in that.
The three-day hearing wraps up Friday. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
After 14 years of discussions, Northwestern Ontario will one day be home to a geological repository that will house nuclear waste, a project with an estimated price tag of $26 billion. Today, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization announced both the town of Ignace and the Wabigoon Lake First Nation have been selected to house it. Last July, the Town Council of Ignace voted in favor of the town's willingness to continue with the site selection process. The nearby Wabigoon Lake First Nation and its members also voted in favor to show its willingness to enter into the next phase of an in-depth environmental and technical assessments to determine the site's safety and suitability. All parties will now take part in a strict licensing and regulation process to make sure the facility will be safe and built in a suitable location. The repository will house millions of bundles of spent nuclear fuel and will be stored in underground rooms and tunnels. Construction for the repository is expected to start in 2033. The site wouldn't be up and running until the early 2040s. The town's mayor says today is about celebrating and is looking forward to the increase in jobs and economic development in the area.
We're prepared, we are ready, and we are excited to begin this chapter and journey on behalf of the people of Ignace, on behalf of the region, and on behalf of all of Northwestern Ontario. Today's announcement has and will continue to change the trajectory and landscape of our community and bring prosperity to all of our communities.
The project is not slated to receive use nuclear fuel till 2043, Chris, and so it's off a bit. So we are now really going to focus on the licensing and regulation process, working with NWMO and having them take the lead in all of this. But we are going to be parties in play.
The Bearspaw First Nation in Treaty 7 territory, about 70 kilometers west of Calgary, are the latest First Nation to file a class action lawsuit against the federal government. The nation is suing for $1 billion for the $5 annuity paid to band members, written in Treaty 7, signed in 1877. Harold Sonny Cochran is representing the nation. He says the $5 annuity was never supposed to be a fixed amount, and now it's almost worthless. He wants the annuity to rise with inflation. Treaty nations in Treaties 2, 4, 5, and 9 have also filed lawsuits on the annuity.
On a scale of 1 to 10 of exploitive actions by Canada, this we say is an 11. Canada's neglect in increasing that annuity payment, which is a key term of the treaty relationship, is really shameful. And it is a disgrace when you think about the billions and billions of dollars that has been taken from the Treaty 7 territory to benefit one side of that treaty relationship. So this lawsuit is to address that historical wrong.
The Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth has released a new report on the state of the province's youth addiction system. The report is called Ina Gakea Bamadzawin, meaning towards the good life. It includes interviews with 39 youth and roundtable discussions with over 120 service providers. It highlights issues that include staff shortages, long wait lists, and geographical barriers. Suggestions include enhancing access, incorporating harm reduction, and developing culturally safe services. On Thursday, the Manitoba government invested in a new virtual consultation service that will support youth struggling with mental health or addictions. It also added $2.4 million to boost psychiatric nurse services and $1.5 million to hire more mental health clinicians. Sunday, Kwes Ka Kapo is a two-spirit youth from the Opaskwayak Cree Nation with lived experience of homelessness and addiction. They emphasize the need for services in northern communities.
Our ancestors have already been displaced from our original lands, and it continues to happen. I am 23 years old. This is not a thing of the past. This is right now. And we need to do better for our communities. We need to do better. There are still youth in northern Manitoba who have to leave their homes to attend boarding schools away from their families for a majority of the year, stripped of their community and their ancestral homes and relations. Northern communities are losing youth to drug poisonings and suicide at extraordinary rates compared to southern Manitoba because the support they need is not available. This is in our own backyards. This is our reality, and this is happening to your fellow Manitobans.
Another politician is facing backlash over claims of indigeneity. Our Truth in Politics panel will be here to discuss that after the break. Welcome back. There is a federal by-election coming up in British Columbia on December 16th. The Cloverdale-Langley city riding was held by the Liberals until the Member of Parliament decided to step down and run in the recent provincial election. Small business owner Madison Fleischer is running for the Liberals, but a BC Métis Society is distancing itself from the candidate who has claimed Métis identity. For more on this, our Truth in Politics panel is here. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pasqua Harbor Strategies, and Negon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Negon, thanks for being here as always. Jennifer, we'll start with you, and can you help us understand what's going on here with the Madison Fleischer, the Liberal candidate in next month's BC by-election?
Yeah, so basically from what I've been told is, there's been some information floating around from a Métis Society out of British Columbia that allegedly there was a Liberal candidate that had reached out to them, and I'm kind of just signaling to their statement that she had asked for an endorsement at one point during her nomination or during the campaign, and they had come back and said, well, are you able to actually point to where your identity ties to, like a family name, anything like that? Because asking, any Indigenous governing body or organization for an endorsement during a political campaign is a fairly big ask. And I don't think they were unreasonable in asking for that. And from what I understand, from what I've seen play out, is that those calls for that verification have not been met. And since then, she has removed the term Métis and Indigenous from all of her social media, and then has since turned into saying, well, now I'll apply for my Métis citizenship or my Métis card in the province of British Columbia. But one would think that that should have been done before even entering the space of asking for an endorsement.
She does have Indigenous advocates still there, but Negon, like Jen saying, BC Métis Society distancing itself from her after they met with her earlier this week, even saying she should step down. Your thoughts?
People, before they claim indigeneity, have to have someone who claims them. So there's a saying in our community, it's not about who you claim, but who claims you. And how you get claimed is through work, through the role that you have in community, through the chopping of the wood, the washing of dishes, the being a good relative. And so it's not about ancestry. And one of the challenges is that individuals who claim some distant grandmother in some community or grandfather or whatever it might be, certainly we see politicians all across the country claiming indigeneity because they see some kind of benefit in it. And that tells you that, there's a very significant change in attitude in particular corners of the political world that this favors you. And second is that you can just do so willingly and parties do not somehow vet you or do not check on you. So as we begin to see parties that begin to ask the proper questions because they are working with Indigenous peoples or communities, legitimate Indigenous organizations, you then have legitimate questions being asked. And in this case, it is not appropriate to simply just claim to be Indigenous unless you have some kind of grounding for that claim. And what that means is who claims you? Who can stand up for you? Who can represent you? And that's what Jen is talking about when talking about either a name or a family. And it's more than a genealogy. It's actually about the work that you do, not simply who did you come from.
Jennifer, just last week we were here discussing Randy Bosno, and here we go again. Why do you think people continue to try this?
I think a lot of it has to do with the way that we have structured opportunity. And that is a big word to use because it shouldn't be viewed as privilege or opportunity, but you will notice that a lot of people keep bringing that up over and over and over again when you call out people that are essentially pretending or copying an identity that doesn't actually belong to them. Because, historically over time, especially as we bring reconciliation to the forefront, there's been historical trauma for Indigenous people across the country. We had the pass system, we've had enfranchisement, we've had things that have hindered us from reaching our full potential over time. And now in comes the government with grants and opportunities to essentially try to level that playing field. But the problem is when you put the concept of identifying identity into the hands of government and people who have traditionally got it wrong in the past, what's going to happen? And I think that's what we're seeing here play out. And on top of that, I know people are going to be, a little bit nitpicky for me bringing this up, but again, identity politics. The hard truth is that no federal party in Canada has latched on to Indigenous identity more than the Liberal Party of Canada has. And I truly believe it's because this was their signal to reconciliation. But in hindsight, what has it done? We now had an Indigenous caucus that's been speaking on behalf of Indigenous people, and you go back and there's people within that caucus that aren't even Indigenous. So what does that do? And what does that do for the space of Indigenous people getting into politics? If there's a political party that is at the forefront of reconciliation and Indigenous identity, you need to get your house in order first and figure out how you're actually going to verify the Indigenous people within that camp before you're going to take a lead on that.
Niigaan, this is a seat that the Liberals held prior to this upcoming by-election, but it's swung between the Liberals and the Conservatives in the past. Do you think all this could be costly at the ballot box for the Liberals?
I mean, it remains to be seen, I suppose. But Jen's right. The Liberals have put a lot of eggs in the basket of trying to gain political power, political credibility by appealing to not just Indigenous voters, but to, I think, a country that wants or is interested in or is in some level engaged with the issue of reconciliation. And BC is one of those places. I mean, BC, in which you see the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples being passed by a province, not simply just by a federal government. What you see in British Columbia kind of a sensibility or a relationship with indigeneity that looks very similar to the prairies, and in some corners of BC, much more so. And would this be impactful to the ways in which this particular by-election will look? It suggests that there could be some ramifications. But what I'm really interested in is what is the Liberal Party going to do about this? They have a scandal right in front of them with Randy Boissonnault. And the fact is that Randy Boissonnault claimed to be Indigenous, what looks like, because of a financial gain, because of a way in which maybe the connections with community are scant, are not evident, certainly not something that can be openly talked about or openly pointed to. And what this looks like is an individual that's much in the same vein. Will the Liberal Party take a stand in which they will demand more accountability for a person who is claiming Indigenous identity to have a relationship with Indigenous peoples? I mean, that same caucus that Jen was speaking about just a minute ago wasn't just about people who were claiming Indigenous identity and perhaps not had a legitimate means to do so, but it was actually the national chief, the now national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Cindy Woodhouse is a former member of that caucus, as well as many other people. Many other people who were part of the Liberal caucus that had relationships with the Liberal Party that is very deep, very strong, and has directed the Liberal Party for quite a long time. And I think that the Liberal Party, when you have a number of people at the table who should know better, that you should listen to those individuals, but also that you should be acting better.
We'll leave it there, but of course we're going to continue this conversation for the podcast, Truth in Politics podcast, and you can watch the whole conversation on our APTN News YouTube page as well. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, me gotcha.
It's Thursday, and that means Nation to Nation is coming up right after the news. We'll have a preview of that and this week's Investigates after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo comes from Calvin Trout in Lac Seul First Nation. A moody vibe on an early morning drive. No snow though. Thanks, Calvin, for sharing. If you want to be featured as our photo of the day, you can email your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 6 with showers in Halifax, a chance of snow, and 4 in Fredericton. +1 and cloudy in Kuujjuaq, 1 in Nain with snow. 3 above and snow in Montreal, -3 and snow for Val-d'Or. +1 and flurries in Sault Ste. Marie, snow and -1 in North Bay. -4 with flurries in Thunder Bay, snow and -6 in Sioux Lookout. -9 with flurries in God's Lake and Norway House. 12 below and snow in Winnipeg, -20 and sunny skies in Dauphin. -29 in Regina, 27 below for Saskatoon. -25 in Meadow Lake, snow and 19 below in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -24 with snow and high level, -19 in Fort Chipewyan. 17 below and snow in Edmonton and Medicine Hat. +5 in Vancouver, -1 and cloudy in Kamloops. -3 with snow in Prince George, 18 below with snow in Dease Lake. -36 in Old Crow, snow, and -23 in Whitehorse. Cloudy and 18 below in Yellowknife, -30 for Norman Wells, -20 in Sax Harbor, 31 below in Fort McPherson. -19. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at what's coming up on tonight's show.
Coming up after the news, we'll talk to the head of the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association about this week's Supreme Court decision on the funding of police services for a Northern Quebec First Nation. Also, I speak to Chief Patricia Bernard of the Wes'kay Nation at Madawaska, but another court decision that upholds First Nations rights claims to privately owned land in New Brunswick. And we'll check in with Northern NDP MLA Leroy LaLiberty and get his thoughts on Saskatchewan's speech from the throne. All this ahead on Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Fraser. See you in a couple minutes. APTN Investigates also returns this week with an all-new episode. Journalist Christopher Reed looks into the controversy surrounding the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods Act, also known as SCAN. The legislation allows for government-enforced evictions of tenants suspected of illegal activity and has come under fire after being used to evict a family of 10 in the Yukon winter. Here's a preview.
It was morning, 2 weeks before Christmas 2020. Celia Wright, a citizen of Ta'an, was living with her partner, her mother-in-law, and 8 children on this rural property. There was a knock at her door.
I heard a very loud knock on my door that woke me up. I checked my doorbell camera to see who was knocking on my door so loudly. And I saw a man with a black toque wearing all black, looking very mean. When I opened the door, there was one man standing there in a square, almost stoic pose. You're being evicted. You have 5 days to get out. And I was like, what? 5 days to get out? That's illegal. Like, it's days before Christmas. You can't kick me out. That's crazy. It's the Yukon. Like, it's winter. It felt scary to open the door and to see that many people, like that many scary people dressed non-officially with guns.
It was all a bit unbelievable for Wright, and that's why she decided to take a stand and take the government to the Supreme Court. But believe it or not, under the right circumstances, this could happen to you. If you live in a jurisdiction that has a Safer Communities and Neighborhoods Act, also known as SCAN.
And you can catch APTN Investigates Scanned, airing this Saturday on APTN. And catch Nation to Nation right here in less than 2 minutes. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For the latest, go to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow.